In a town where dust settles heavier than hope, a girl named Mara counts every coin like it's her last breath. One broken bottle, one unpaid drink, one wrong word, and everything could collapse. But tonight, something changes. A stranger walks in, and the air shifts like a storm rolling over dry land. Who is he? And why does fate seem to follow in his footsteps? Stay with me, because this isn't just a story about survival. It's about the moment everything begins to change. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to support more stories like this.
That whiskey bottle busted just 3 inches from Mary Bennett's head. She never even flinched. All she saw was half a day's wages soaking right into the floorboards. That was money for her brother Samuel's medicine, already 2 days late. You deaf girl? That was Jack Sterling, the railroad foreman, drunk as a skunk before supper. I said, "Get me another." Mary straightened up, her back screaming after 16 hours on her feet. Her feet had gone numb hours ago, which was a small mercy. "Soon as you pay for the one you just broke," she said, her voice worn clean out. Sterling's face swelled up red. The other fellas at his table got real quiet, sensing trouble. But Mary was too bone-tired to care about getting fired. She'd been up since 4 o'clock that morning listening to Samuel's lungs rattle. Between them, they had $3.18. The doctor alone cost $5. "My daddy died working," Mary said, each word a heavy stone. "That mine collapse was not his fault," Sterling scoffed. Him and the others were too dumb to smell the bad air. That was the company line, the easy lie that buried 12 good men, her father included. They called it worker negligence, and the judge just signed the papers. Mary was only 14 when they pulled his body from that hole. Now, at 22, she could still feel the weight of all that dirt and darkness. "Get out," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Sterling just laughed. "Your saloon? Girl, you don't own a thing. You're here to serve drinks and clean up messes." From behind the bar, Morrison, the owner, just watched. He wouldn't lift a finger. The railroad crew spent too much money to ever be wrong. A serving girl was easy to replace. Mary knew the rules by heart, had followed them for 3 long years. Keep your head down, keep your mouth shut. But that morning, Samuel had coughed up a little bit of blood. It was just a speck of red, but she knew it was a death sentence. "I said get out," Mary repeated. Sterling took a step, ready to prove how big he was. He was all hot breath and cheap whiskey. Just then, the saloon door swung open. The whole feel of the room changed, the way the air gets heavy right before a storm hits. The man who walked in was tall and looked like he was carved from something that did not break. His hat shadowed his face, but you could see his eyes, pale and sharp, taking in the whole scene at once. Then those light-colored eyes landed on her. "Place still serving?" the stranger asked. His voice was low and steady. He walked over to a corner table, the kind a man picks so he can keep his back to a wall and watch the doors. The fight went right out of Sterling, who just grumbled and shoved his way to the bar. Mary felt a breath leave her lungs she did not know she was holding. She went to the stranger's table. "What can I get for you?" she asked. "Whiskey," he said. "Whatever is decent." "None of it is decent," she told him, "but some of it will not kill you." A small smile touched his lips. "I will take those odds." As she turned to go, he asked, "You all right?" The question was so direct, so honest, it caught her off guard. "I am fine," she lied. This time he smiled for real, just for a second. Mary went and poured a glass from the good bottle the boss kept hidden. She set it down in front of him. The stranger laid a silver dollar on the wood table. "The drink is 30 cents, she said. "I know. A whole $1. That was medicine money, with enough left over for real food. "Thank you," she whispered, hating that her voice cracked. She hurried away before the tears she refused to cry decided to show up. The stranger sat there for hours, nursing that one drink, just watching. He finally left around 1 in the morning. When Mary went to clear his table, she found another silver dollar tucked under the empty glass. After all the unseen, grimy work, Morrison paid her just $2.40 for 2 hard days. It was barely enough to keep her and her brother Samuel from going hungry in their little room. But a stranger's $2 tip brought her total near $5, enough to see the doctor. She was there waiting when he opened his office at 6 in the morning. Red Hollow was a town of dust and shadows, a forgotten place where people came when they ran out of road. Back in their room, Samuel slept, his breath catching in his chest with a painful sound. By moonlight, she counted out her $4.40. The choice was food or medicine. She chose medicine. The next morning, she was on Doc Pritchard's doorstep. He was a kind man with hands that shook, but he was good at his work. "He's coughing up blood," she told him plainly. The old doctor's face turned grim. They both knew what that meant for a boy who had not yet turned 17. "I need more of the tonic," she said. "A month's supply will run you $8. Mary showed him what she had. "I have 5. The doctor sighed, then pulled 2 bottles off a shelf. "The tonic 3 times a day. The laudanum is for the pain, but just a few drops at a time." Mary started to say she couldn't afford it with only $5. "I know," he said softly. "Pay me what you can, when you can." His kindness stung more than cruelty ever had. You can brace yourself for a hit, but kindness finds its way through your defenses. Back in the room, she gave Samuel a dose before eating a piece of dry bread herself. She had 4 hours until her shift, but sleep was a thing she could not afford. Her mind just ran the hard numbers of staying alive. They never added up, but she was still here, still fighting, and that had to mean something. That night, the stranger came back. He sat at the same corner table, quiet as ever. This time, Morrison brought the whiskey over himself, all smiles for a big tipper. Mary tried to stay away, but she could feel him watching her. Around 10, she brought him a second glass. "Thanks," was all he said. "Keep tipping like that, and I might just bring the whole bottle," she said, trying to sound light. "I might take you up on that," he replied, and his voice made her pause. "Can I ask you something?" Mary steeled herself. This was it, the price for his kindness. But his question was not what she expected. "You always work this hard?" She looked at his face but saw no pity, just curiosity. "I work as hard as I have to," she said. "My brother is sick." He simply nodded, like that was the most sensible answer in the world. "What is your name?" She should not have answered, but something made her. "Mary Bennett." "William Carter." No handshake was offered, but the sharing of names felt like a line had been crossed. As she walked away, she felt a dangerous spark of hope, and she tried her best to put it out. Hope could get you killed in a place like this. Still, William Carter came back the next night, and the one after that, always with his quiet questions about nothing important. His visit started to change things. Morrison gave her better shifts. The other patrons treated her with a newfound respect. The tips got better, too. Mary hated that her worth seemed to rise and fall with a man's attention, but she needed the money for Samuel. After 2 weeks, she had saved nearly $20. It was enough to pay the doctor and buy real food. But she did not feel relieved. She felt like she was being watched. Every gift has a price. And she worried about the day William Carter would come to claim his. That day arrived on a Thursday night, about 3 weeks after he first walked in. She was carrying drinks when a man named Sterling called out, "Hey, Carter, you have been spending a lot of time in town." William glanced up, his face a mask, but the saloon grew tense. "That right?" Sterling grinned. "Yeah. Folks are wondering why a cattle baron is wasting his time here just drinking and watching the help." The saloon went quiet. Mary put her tray down, knowing this trouble had her name on it. "A man can drink where he wants," William said, his voice calm and low. Sterling's ugly smile grew. "Of course. But people talk. They wonder if it is the whiskey you are really interested in." His eyes flicked toward Mary, and a cold fear washed over her. A woman's reputation was all she had. A person might wonder what kind of arrangement you two have. William stood up. He did not rush. He rose with a slow, deliberate motion that promised a fight. "Finish that sentence," he said quietly, "and we will take this outside." Sterling's confidence disappeared. He was bigger, but William looked like he was made of coiled wire and bad intentions. "No need for trouble," Sterling mumbled as he backed away. "Talk somewhere else." Sterling and his friends left in a hurry. Just like that, the tension broke, and the saloon went back to its business. Mary was rooted to the spot by the bar, with anger and shame all twisted up inside her. She hadn't asked William to protect her, not one bit. She was just trying to get by, and now she was the town gossip. In her mind, the future was already laid out plain. Morrison would let her go to keep his customers. Her landlord would kick her out. Samuel would pass without his medicine. And she would end up right where that man Sterling said she belonged. It was all because a stranger decided to be nice. William came over and put some money down. He looked at Mary and said, "I'm sorry. I did not mean for that to happen." She truly looked at him then, and something inside her just broke, mostly anger. "What were you trying to do?" she asked, her voice sharp. "To help. I do not need your help. Everyone needs a little help, not yours." She forced the words out. "I do not know what you want, mister. I just want to work, so please leave me be." A look of hurt crossed his face. He just nodded and went to the door. He stopped and looked back at her. "For what it is worth," he said, "I never wanted a thing from you. I just figured you could use a friend." Then he was gone. Mary stood there, her heart pounding. She did not see him for 2 days after that. Without William's money, her earnings were cut almost in half. The other men in the saloon started ignoring her again. Morrison, her boss, started nagging her about her attitude. Sterling came back to his regular table, just smirking at her every time she passed. The medicine was gone in a week. Samuel took a turn for the worse. His coughing spells got longer. She went to Pritchard and begged for more medicine on credit. He gave her 3 days' worth and told her to prepare herself. How could anyone prepare for their little brother to die? That night, Mary walked home. She found Samuel sitting up in bed. His eyes looked too old for a 16-year-old boy. "You should let me go," he said. "To the hospital." That place was where people were sent to die alone. Their families could not afford to watch them pass at home. Samuel would just be another body in an iron bed. "No," Mary said. "I said no. You are killing yourself for me," he said. "You do not sleep or eat. I am fine. You are not fine. You," he argued, then started coughing hard. "Please," he whispered. "Let me go so you can have a life." "You are my life," Mary said. Her voice was solid, even as she was breaking inside. "You are all I have. So no, we are not quitting." He looked at her with love and pure exhaustion. "Then we are both going to die here," he said. "Maybe," she answered. "Then we die, but we do it together." She lay next to him until he slept. In the dark, she heard hoofbeats coming down the dirt road. They were steady, like something you could not stop. It sounded like William Carter coming back. The sound stopped outside just as the sun was coming up. Mary was already awake. She heard the boots on the stairs and knew it was him. She opened the door. William Carter stood there holding his hat. "I am sorry it is so early," he said, "but I must talk to you." "I have work in 3 hours," she said. "I am not buying whatever you are selling. I am not selling a thing." He looked past her and saw Samuel on the bed. His face changed. "Can we talk outside?" She should have just shut the door. But Samuel was finally sleeping, and she was so tired of that sick room. She stepped out onto the landing. They stood in the morning sun, facing off. "I should not have left," William said, when Sterling started his talk. "I should have stayed to explain." "Explain what?" "Why I'm here." He nervously turned his hat in his hands. "I know how this all looks. A rich man pays too much mind to the saloon girl, but it is not what they are thinking." "What is it then?" He looked her right in the eye. I had to know if you were real. She let out a short, bitter laugh. What in the world does that mean? It means for 15 years, everyone around me has wanted something. Land, money, favors. They all smile and lie. After a time, you forget what honesty even looks like. He took a breath. Then I saw you in that saloon. You refused to back down to a drunk who could have gotten you fired. And I remembered. You do not know me. I know you work yourself to the bone for a dying brother. I know you have more pride than sense. And you keep a temper locked down so tight it is a miracle you do not just burst. He smiled a little. That is more than I know about most folks. Mary wanted to fight him, but she was just too worn out. Why are you really here, William? Model. I need your help, he said, and that stopped her cold. He was buying 5,000 acres up north and needed someone who knew the territory and its people. He offered fair wages, a roof over her head, and real medical care for her brother. Her world spun. You are offering me a job, she said slowly. He nodded, saying he trusted her honesty. Then he laid it out plain. Her brother needed help she could not earn at the saloon. There was the catch she had been waiting for, and it stung. I do not need saving, she told him. This is not a rescue, he replied. It is a choice. He put his hat back on. I am in town for 2 more days. Find me at the hotel if you decide. He stopped. One last thing. People are going to talk, and it will get ugly. They will call you my mistress, and worse. You need to know that going in. She said she was used to rumors. Not this kind, he said, his face like stone. Not when money is involved. I'm telling you this so you walk in with your eyes open. He then went down the stairs. For what it is worth, he added, I do not give a damn what they say, but you might. Then he was gone. Mary felt struck. A real chance laid right in front of her. Inside, her brother Samuel stirred from his sleep. Who was that? He rasped. Maybe somebody, she whispered back. All morning she weighed her pride against his hope. When she got to the saloon, Morrison was in a foul mood. News travels fast in Red Hollow. That rancher came by, he sneered. I am sure he had a business proposition for you. His face turned ugly. I know what men like him want from girls like you. You will be warming his bed inside of a month. She had taken his abuse for years, but that was the last straw. I have worked hard for you for 3 years, she said, her voice low. And you call me a whore because a man offered me honest work? Morrison just snorted. There is nothing honest about what he is offering. We will just see how it ends, I guess, she said, untying her apron. I quit. Morrison just stared, speechless. Keep my wages, she told him as she walked out with her heart pounding in her chest. She had just burned her only bridge, all for an offer that might be a lie. There was no going back now. She marched straight to the hotel. A sour-faced woman at the desk pointed her upstairs to room 12. Each step she took felt like walking off a cliff in the dark. At the door, she hesitated. This was it. She could drown here, or grab for a hand that might pull her under even faster. She knocked. William opened the door, looking surprised. Mary? I need to know this is real, she said right away. Prove you are not just some rich man playing a game. It is real, he said, stepping aside. Come in and see for yourself. The room was clean, with a desk by the window covered in maps and official papers. He handed her a document. The deed for 5,000 acres, he said. I am building a ranch. Then he showed her a contract. $30 a month, plus room, board, and medical care for you and your family. $30 was a fortune. What would I be doing? She asked. I need help building this place, he said. Someone to deal with folks, manage the books, and tell me when I'm wrong. Someone I can trust. He told her she could check his references. or even ride out to see the land for herself. She looked at the contract. It all seemed proper. "What about Samuel's medical care?" she asked. His face softened. "It means a real doctor. Whatever he needs, for however long it takes. That could cost hundreds." "I would do it for my employee's brother," he said simply. "There is a difference. Look, I am not going. This ain't charity, it's just smart business. Folks can't work right when they're worried sick." That made more sense than anything. She couldn't take charity, but business was different. "I have my terms," Mary said flatly. "Go on. First, this is a job. That's it. Nothing more than what we agree on. Done. Second, if town talk hurts your business, I walk. No arguments." William frowned. "That's my deal. Take it or leave it." He looked her over, then gave a slow nod. "All right. But you have to tell me if I cross a line before you go." "Fine. Third, Samuel is with me. He's part of any deal for housing. I figured as much. And if the doctor says it's his time, I need to be with him." William's face softened. "Of course." Mary took a deep breath. This was real. "When are we leaving?" "Day after tomorrow. Got things to settle here." He held out a weathered hand. "We got a deal?" She stared at his steady hand, thinking of 100 ways this could sour. But Samuel was fading, and staying put was a sure death. She shook it. "We have a deal." The next day and a half was a rush of packing up their life. Their few things didn't take long to pack. She went to see Doc Pritchard to settle up. He just waved her off, but she left $5 on his desk. Debts were a cage she wouldn't be in. She never went back to the saloon. Let them all whisper. She was done with Red Hollow's judgment. Samuel's quiet relief nearly broke her heart. He wasn't scared, just grateful for a chance to hope. "You reckon that doctor can help?" he asked. "We're fixin' to find out." "And if he can't?" She looked at her brother, only 16 and already half a ghost. "Then we went down swinging," she said. He managed a small, sad smile. "Sounds like you." "What does?" "Fighting a losing fight." "I don't know it's a losing one." "Mary?" "I don't," she said, her voice firm. "We're getting you to that doctor, and he's going to get you better. That's the plan. And if it don't work, we make a new one. It's what we do." They left at dawn. William had a wagon ready. He helped Samuel into the back with a surprising gentleness, then gave Mary a hand up. "Ready?" William asked. She took one last look at the dusty town, the saloon where she'd wasted 3 years. She thought of her father in the boneyard on the hill and all the town's ghosts. "Ready," she said. They headed north, and the country opened up, leaving the canyon for wide grasslands and distant blue mountains. The air just smelled cleaner. For the first hour, no one spoke. Samuel slept in the back. Mary sat ramrod straight, aware of William right beside her. "You can relax," he said finally. "I'm relaxed. You're sitting like you're about to jump ship." She made her shoulders drop. "Better?" "Some." He glanced her way. "Always this tense?" "Only around strangers who just flipped my whole life over." "Fair enough." He was quiet a spell. "I just need to know if trusting you is a mistake." "Can't answer that," he said. "Ask me in a month." She almost smiled. "Not one for sweet talk, are you?" "I'm one for honesty. Reassurance is mostly just a pretty lie." He fiddled with the reins. "But I'll tell you this. I pay what I owe, and I've never wronged nobody that worked for me. That's the best promise you'll get." It wasn't comfort, but it was solid. Mary leaned back and watched the planes roll by. She tried not to overthink it. They stopped for a meal by a creek shaded by cottonwoods. William let the horses drink while she helped Samuel from the wagon. He looked a little better out here, breathing easier in the clean air. "How much farther?" Samuel asked. "Another 4 hours, give or take," William said, unpacking bread and cheese. It was more than she'd seen in one meal for months. "We'll be there by dark." They ate on the rocks, the only sounds being the creak and the wind. It was the most peace Mary had felt in years, and she didn't trust it one bit. Peace was a trick before the world kicked you again. But Samuel smiled, a real smile, and that was worth something. They got to the property as the sun bled across the mountains. William stopped on a rise and just pointed. There. The land rolled out before them, golden grass and sage. A silver river snaked through the valley. It was empty. It was bigger than anything she'd ever seen. 5,000 acres, William said softly. Got water rights, timber rights, and room for 1,000 head of cattle. Where's the ranch? Mary asked. We're going to build it. He pointed to a flat patch by the river. House goes there, barns and such behind it. What do you think, son? He asked her. To her it looked like a dream, a world away from dying towns like Red Hollow. It was a big gamble, the kind that could make or break them. It is an awful lot of empty, she said. He laughed, a genuine sound. That is the point. You need a clean slate to build a new start. That night they camped right where the house would be. He set up a tent for her and Samuel and took his bedroll under the wagon. Samuel, worn out from the trip, fell asleep right away. But Mary lay awake, listening to the wild sounds of coyotes in the river. The silence was louder than any town noise. The stars were thick as spilled salt. She heard William tending the fire, and then his voice came from outside her tent. You still awake? I am. Too quiet for you? Not used to it. Give it a few days. I've got coffee on. She slipped out quietly. He handed her a tin cup, and they sat across the small fire, drinking in silence. Thank you, she said at last. For the job, for bringing us out here. Hold your thanks, and he replied, the real work has not started. I do not mind hard work. I know, he said. That is why I hired you. He stared into the flames. Tomorrow, we are heading to Stillwater. It is about 15 miles west. I have got a meeting with a builder, and I want you there. Then we are taking Samuel to the doctor. Mary gripped her cup. You already found a doctor? Sent a wire 3 days back. He is waiting for us. William's gaze was steady. I told you I would cover the costs, and I meant it. But what if he cannot be fixed? Then we will find one who can. Denver, San Francisco, wherever we have to go. Hearing him talk about spending so much money did not make her wary, just weary. She was tired of fighting a losing battle. Why are you really doing this? She asked. It cannot just be good business. He was quiet for a moment, watching the fire. I had a sister, he said softly. Younger than me, like Samuel is to you. She took sick at 15. My father was a proud man, said doctors were a waste. He thought he could handle it. He paused, his throat tight. She was gone in 3 weeks. I made a promise then. If I ever had the money, I would never let that happen to someone else's family. He looked right at her. So no, it is not just business. It is personal. A crack formed in the wall around Mary's heart. I'm so sorry about your sister. Me too. He stood and tossed out his coffee. Get some rest. Long day tomorrow. He vanished into the dark. Mary sat there thinking she might have been wrong about William Carter. Maybe he just wanted an honest worker he could trust. The idea that someone could be truly kind scared her more than anything. Stillwater was bigger than Red Hollow, but had the same mix of hope and dust. The main street was wide, with buildings trying to look important, like a bank and a hotel. William pulled the wagon up to the doctor's office. The sign read, Dr. Harrison Webb, M.D., Harvard Medical School. A Harvard man way out here? Mary muttered. Everyone is running from something or to something, William replied, climbing down. I will help Samuel. You coming? She was already helping her brother, who looked pale and tired but said nothing. Inside, the office smelled sharp and clean. A nurse greeted them. Mr. Carter, Dr. Webb is ready for you all. Please come on back. They walked down a hall to a bright examination room. The room was almost too bright. A tall, silver-haired man was washing his hands. His face looked like it had seen it all. "Samuel Bennett?" he asked, drying his hands. "Yes, sir." "I am Dr. Webb. Let us have a look." He pointed to the table. "Miss Bennett, you are welcome to stay." Mary let out a breath she did not know she was holding and stood by her brother. The doctor was thorough, his questions sharp and his hands gentle. It was clear he knew far more than their old-town doctor. William stood quietly by the door, twisting his hat. After 20 minutes, Dr. Webb looked at Samuel. "How bad is it, Doc?" Samuel's voice was firm, but his hands trembled. "It is pulmonary tuberculosis, and it is advanced. Without treatment, you likely have 3 to 6 months." The world spun, and Mary gripped the table. "And with treatment?" William asked from the doorway. "A sanatorium in Colorado Springs," the doctor said. "The high, dry air helps. It is no cure. But it can give him years. He would have to live there for at least a year, maybe more. It is a strict life of total rest." "What's it cost?" Mary finally asked. $60 a month, the doctor said. "Figure $800 for the first year." An impossible sum, more than she could earn in 10 years. "I'll handle it," William stated. "No," Mary shot back. "That's a fortune. I can't let you." "You will," William's voice turned to iron. "This ain't a discussion. The boy needs help, and I have the means. End of story." "It's not the end," she snapped, trembling. "How could I ever live with that debt? I'd never be free." "I am not asking for repayment. That's worse. It makes me a charity case." A weak hand found her arm. "Mary," Samuel pleaded, "I want to go." Looking at his frail body, her resolve crumbled. "I'm tired of you watching me die," he whispered. "Please, let me try." The doctor quietly excused himself to give them a moment. Mary stood there shaking, every part of her screaming against owing a man she barely knew. "We'll make it a formal contract," William said softly. "A loan. You can pay me back over 10 years, 20, however long it takes. But he is going." "Why?" she asked, her voice broken. "Because your brother is 16 and deserves to see 17, he said, arms crossed. "And what good is money if you don't use it to help folks who need it?" Mary looked from Samuel to William. The choice was clear: her brother's life or her own pride. "Fine," she whispered. The word felt like defeat. "But we draw up a proper contract. I will pay back every last cent." "Deal," William agreed, calling the doctor back in. "How soon can he travel?" "If they have a bed, he could leave this week," the doctor explained, then turned to Samuel. "It will be a hard trip." "I am strong enough," Samuel insisted. They left with a stack of papers that felt fragile in Mary's hands. Their next stop was a builder's yard, where a capable-looking man named Garrett waited. "Mr. Carter," Garrett greeted them. "Is this the manager you told me about?" "Mary Bennett," William introduced her. "She will be running the place. Mary, meet Thomas Garrett, best builder around." Garrett smiled. "Mr. Carter showed me the plans. Good design. We can frame it in 6 weeks, finish it in 3 months." "And the price?" Mary had to ask. "The plans were for a huge house meant to feed 20 men. 1,500 for the house, another 500 for the other buildings. I will need half to start," Garrett explained. $2,000. Mary felt dizzy. With Samuel's care, William was spending nearly $3,000 before making a dime. "When can you begin?" William asked. "Monday, if the contracts look right." They spent the next hour reviewing the paperwork. Mary paid close attention, absorbing the new language of business. William was a sharp negotiator, ensuring the terms were fair for everyone. He signed the papers, and Garrett promised to have his men there on Monday. Back at the hotel, William got a separate room just as he had promised. While he went to arrange Samuel's train ticket, Mary got her exhausted brother settled into bed. He was asleep in moments. She sat by his side, watching his chest rise and fall, a familiar and painful ritual. A knock on the door woke her. It was William holding a telegram. "They have a bed," he said quietly. A train leaves Thursday morning. I will have a man take him there. Thursday. Only 3 days away. I need to go with him, Mary insisted. I need you here, he countered. The work starts Monday. I am sending Patterson, a good man I trust. He will see that Samuel arrives safely. But I should be the one, she argued. I know, son, he said gently. But this is the sensible choice. You can visit later. It was logical, but it tore at her heart. All right, she agreed. Thursday. The next 3 days were a blur. She packed Samuel's meager things, trying to ignore how young and scared he seemed. William bought him a warm coat and new clothes, adding to a debt she could never measure. Thursday morning was cold and grim at the train station. Patterson, a kind-faced man in his 40s, promised to wire her upon their arrival. You look after him, Mary pleaded, her voice thick. You have my word, ma'am. Samuel gave her a tight hug. Don't you go dying on me, Samuel whispered. You neither, she managed. He gave a weak smile, then boarded the train. It pulled away with a screech, taking her brother toward an uncertain future. Mary just stood on the platform, refusing to cry. Come on, William said quietly. Let's go home. Home. The word felt strange. This empty land was not home yet, but maybe it could be. They rode back in silence. The land now seemed less like a dream and more like a challenge. The kind of hard work that builds something real. Garrett's crew of a dozen competent men arrived Monday. William made it clear that Mary's word was his own, and not a single man argued. The work became her entire world. She kept the books, tracked deliveries, and learned the difference between types of lumber and mortar. She worked 16-hour days and fell into bed too exhausted to think, which was exactly what she needed. To her surprise, William worked right alongside the crew. She thought he would be the type to shout orders from a distance, but William was right there in the dirt with his men, framing walls and digging trenches. He was everywhere, but never in the way. You do not have to do that, Mary said one night as they went over the books. The manual labor, I mean. You are paying men for that. A man cannot manage what he does not understand, he said, flexing a sore hand. Besides, it keeps me honest. He chuckled. I grew up rich and foolish. It took me a long time to learn the difference between having something and earning it. What changed your mind? She asked. His smile vanished. My father died and left me everything. I was 22 and thought I knew it all. I nearly destroyed the family business in 5 years, so I started over from the bottom. I learned from the men who did the real work. Took me 10 years to build it all back right, he continued. That is why I need you. You notice things I do not. In just 2 weeks, you have caught mistakes, gotten us better prices, and sped up the whole schedule. He closed the book. Do not ever sell yourself short, Mary. You are very good at this. The praise felt strange and warm inside her. She was not used to it. I am just doing my job. I know, he said. That is why it matters. A week on, a wire came from Colorado. Samuel was there, safe, and settled in the sanatorium. The doctor promised his best care. Mary read the words over and over. He was safe. That was enough for now. The house came up from the dirt, slow but sure. Walls, a roof, windows. It felt permanent, like it would outlast them. 2 months in, William brought in 50 head of cattle. The trail boss that delivered them gave some advice before leaving. You'll need more hands by spring. Can't grow a herd this size by your lonesome. I'll hire then. Get good men. Cheap help always costs you more. After he rode off, William and Mary watched the new herd. 50 doesn't seem like much, she said. It's a start, he replied, leaning on the fence. Every big fire starts with a little spark. Big fires burn out too. Always the ray of sunshine, ain't you? Someone's got to keep their feet on the ground. He gave a slight smile at that. Maybe, but sometimes keeping your feet on the ground is just another way of being scared. Fair enough. He stood up from the fence. Come on. Garrett says the kitchen's finished. Want to see? The kitchen was bigger in Dallas, just like the plans showed. A massive cast-iron stove, a sink with real running water, and thick pine counters. Light poured in from two walls, making the whole place shine. It's too much, Mary said. It's what we need for a crew. Can't feed a dozen hands with a campfire. He grinned. Just wait till you see the rest. The house was a mansion, 6 bedrooms, each one bigger than her entire old room, and a parlor with a fireplace you could walk into. Then she saw the library, with built-in shelves from floor to ceiling. Why does a ranch house need a library? Because I like to read, he said, touching a shelf. And I reckon you do, too. You can help me fill these shelves. The casual offer, the idea of books and the time to read them, hit her hard. A life beyond just surviving. Thank you, she said, her voice low. For what? For treating me like I'm more than just a pair of hands. William watched her for a long moment. Mary, you need to understand, you are worth more than your labor. You're worth... He trailed off. Worth investing in, he finally said. As a person, I mean that. She wanted to believe him, but trust was a luxury she'd learned she couldn't afford. It was just another game for a rich man. I should get back to the ledgers, she said, dodging his intensity. That night, lying in her big new room, she tried to make sense of it all. 3 months ago, she had a dying brother and $2 silver. Now he was getting treatment, and she was living in a palace, earning more than she'd ever dreamed. It didn't add up. Men like him didn't offer help without strings attached. This kindness felt like a trap, and it scared her more than anything. If she let herself believe in him, what would happen when he pulled the rug out from under her? In her old life, she expected nothing and was never disappointed. This new life had a different kind of math, one she couldn't figure out. A few days later, a rider brought a telegram from Stillwater. William read it, and his face went hard as a rock. What is it? She asked. He just handed it to her. Urgent. Mine disaster, Silver Creek 12 dead. Investigation ordered. Your presence requested. Her blood ran cold. The Silver Creek mine was where her father died 8 years ago, a tragedy the company blamed on the miners themselves. Why are they wiring you? She asked, her voice tight. William looked at her, and she saw the truth in his eyes before he spoke. Because my family owns the mine, he said quietly. We have for 15 years. The world stopped turning. What? She whispered. The Carter Mining Company. My father's company. Now it's mine. I thought you knew. Her hand holding the telegram began to shake. Your family's company killed my father. Mary, don't. Don't you dare. She shot back, her voice breaking. You knew? This whole time you knew who I was, and you never said one single word. That investigation was a sham, and the whole territory knew it. Your daddy's lawyers paid off the judge, blamed the miners, and walked away clean while we put our kin in the ground. Her whole body trembled, and you knew. You knew what that tore out of my family, and you never said a word. I am not my father, William said, his voice low and tight. What he did, I didn't know the truth until after he died. I found documents, safety reports he buried. My father knew that mine was a death trap, but he kept it running to save a few dollars. And that's supposed to help? You found out your father was a killer and just took over his company? Kept getting rich off the very mines that killed my people? I have been trying to make it right. Every mine has safety inspections now, real engineers. I have spent 2 years cleaning up his mess. But you never told me. Mary's voice was breaking. You had every chance in the world to tell me, and you kept your mouth shut. Why? William finally met her gaze, and what she saw there was a storm of pain. But it wasn't enough. Because I was a coward, he said. I knew if I told you, you would leave. I needed you here. for the ranch, and I liked having you here. So I told myself it was old history, that you didn't need to know. It matters to me." Hot tears streamed down her face. It was all that ever mattered. My whole life was built on the ruin your family made, and you thought it wasn't worth a mention? I am sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back. It doesn't give me back the 8 years I spent clawing to survive. Sorry doesn't... Her voice shattered. She couldn't stand there in a house built with blood money. She turned and headed for the barn. "Where are you going?" William called. "Away from you. Mary, please, let me fix this. There is nothing to fix." She snatched a bridle from a hook. "You lied to me. Maybe not with words, but your silence was a lie. And I won't." Her hands trembled as she saddled a horse, swung up, and rode off without a backward glance. Behind her, William stood in the yard of his half-built house, watching her disappear. For the first time, he looked completely lost. Mary rode hard until the horse was lathered and her hands were numb. She had no destination, just a desperate need for distance. The land stretched out around her, endless grass under a sky turning purple at dusk. It was beautiful country, but a cruel country, the kind that promised heaven and delivered only heartache. She stopped by a creek, letting the horse drink as she sat on a rock, trying to breathe past the sharp pain in her chest. It felt like a broken rib was cutting her up from the inside. She kept seeing her father's face, not as he was at the end, but before, laughing, teaching her to read, swinging her high in the air. The Carter Mining Company stole that. They knew the risks and sent men down to die for profit. They covered it up, blamed the dead, and walked away. And William had known. Every kindness he'd shown her, the job, Samuel's care, suddenly felt like hush money for a debt he'd never admit to, guilt wearing the mask of generosity. The sun was gone when she heard hoofbeats. She did not turn. She knew who it was. William dismounted a few yards off, giving her room. For a long while, the only sound was the creak. "I brought your coat," he said at last. "It is getting cold. I do not want a thing from you. I know, but you will freeze without it." He placed it on a nearby rock. "I am not asking for forgiveness or for you to come back. I just need you to listen. 5 minutes and then I will ride out and you will never have to see me again." Mary watched the water run over smooth stones, indifferent to her pain. She ought to send him away, but instead she gave a slight nod. He sat on a rock across from her, just close enough to talk. "My father was a bastard," he said plainly. "He built his fortune on the backs of men he saw as disposable. I was young and I did not see it. I thought he was just a hard man making tough choices. When I was 22, there was a strike at a copper mine. The men wanted safer conditions. My father hired thugs who beat the workers bloody. They killed 3 of them and broke the strike with terror. He tossed a stone into the water. I was there. I watched it all happen, and I did nothing." Mary looked at him then, and saw the shame etched on his face. "That is when I understood the kind of man he was, and the kind of man I was becoming. So I left, told him I wanted no part of his company. He laughed at me, said I would come crawling back within a year. But you did not. Not while he was alive. I worked ranches, I drove cattle, I learned what real work was. I learned the difference between earning $1 and taking one." He met her eyes. "When he died 5 years ago, he left it all to me. I could have sold it, walked away. Why didn't you? Because selling it off meant another man just like him might take over. This way, I could try to fix what he broke. I shut down 3 of his most dangerous mines. I updated the equipment. I hired real engineers, and I put in actual safety rules. It cost me a fortune, but I had to. That does not change what happened to my father. No, ma'am. It doesn't. Nothing can change that." He stood and faced her. "When I found the files about Silver Creek, the buried reports, the bribes, I spent a week trying to figure out how to make it right. But you cannot make it right. 12 men died. So you said nothing. I said nothing because I was a coward. I knew you would look at me exactly the way you are looking at me now, like I am to blame. And maybe I am for owning the company that did it. But Mary, I swear, I did not know it was Silver Creek specifically until 3 months ago. I was going through his old records and found a legal paper that mentioned the Bennett family. That is when I knew, 3 months ago, before you ever came to Red Hollow. He nodded. So you knew. When you walked into that saloon, when you offered me that job, when you paid for Samuel, you knew the whole time. Yes. His honesty was a slap in the face. It was worse than any lie. Why? She demanded. Why do all this if you knew? Because I owed you. My family destroyed yours. I wanted to give you and your brother the life my father took away. You can't just fix this with money, she yelled, anger and betrayal tearing through her. My father is still dead. Those 8 years of hell I lived through are still real. Nothing you do changes that. I know, he said. Then what is this? Are you trying to buy redemption for your family's sins by playing savior to me? I'm trying to do the right thing, he shot back. I'm using the money I got from a man I hated to help people he would have crushed. Is that so wrong? It's wrong when you lie about it. I never lied to you. You lied by leaving things out. You let me trust you without telling me the truth. Tears streamed down her face, and she hated herself for them. William's shoulders fell. I'm sorry, he said softly. He said, for what it's worth, I am truly sorry. They stood in the twilight, separated by a history too painful for words. The investigation, she said at last. Another collapse? Yes. Different tunnel, same mine. 3 men dead this time. Is it your fault, like it was your father's? I don't know, he admitted. I'll own whatever responsibility is mine. But I need the truth first. He looked at her then, his face grim. And you have to decide if you can keep working for the son of the man who killed your father. He swung up onto his horse. The house is finished. Your contract is good through the spring, and I'll honor it. If you want to leave, I'll give you 3 months' pay. If you want to stay, the job is yours. Just like that? Just like that. It's your choice, Mary. He turned his horse. I leave for Stillwater at dawn. He rode away, leaving her alone under the stars. That night, she didn't return to the big house. She made a small camp by the creek, realizing the kindness that had felt like salvation was really just a debt being paid. To lie. The job felt like it was paid for with blood money. Even the house was built on the suffering of men like her father. But that same money was saving Samuel. Did the good it was doing wash away the bad? She did not have an answer. By dawn, William had already ridden out, heading for his own fight. Inside the quiet house, she found a note on the office desk. He thanked her for making the place feel real and left information on how to check on Samuel. She put the note in her pocket and sat down with the ledger. At least numbers were honest. She went through the accounts, the familiar work a comfort in the chaos. 3 hours later, she found it. A separate account going back 5 years, labeled Restitution Fund. It was full of payments to families for medical expenses. She opened the ledger and saw names: Henderson, Martinez, O'Reilly. All men who had died in his family's mines. Her hands began to tremble as she tallied the numbers. Over $100,000 paid out in 5 years. It went to widows and children, to men broken by the work. Then she saw the name she was looking for. Samuel Bennett. $800 for his medical care. It was not a loan or an advance. It was William making things right, paying a debt the law would never make him pay. For 5 years, he had been quietly using the fortune his father built on suffering to try and heal it. He wanted no credit, just to do what he thought was right. It could not change the past, but it meant something. To stop her mind from spinning, she threw herself into ranch work. Small choices about paint and hardware kept the bigger questions at bay. A telegram came on the 5th day. Samuel was getting better. Sitting on the porch of the house that blood money built, she cried until she was empty. When William returned, she was waiting in the barn, brushing down a horse just to have something to do with her hands. He looked worn to the bone, standing in the sunlit doorway. How did it go? she asked. Worse than I imagined, he said quietly. The new foreman cut corners on safety to speed things up. He ignored 2 engineers who warned him the tunnel was unstable. William leaned against the frame. I fired him, shut the mine down. The families have been taken care of. He sighed. The governor's talking new regulations. Will they press charges? Against the foreman, probably. Against me? He gave a bitter laugh. I hired him. The responsibility is mine. Mary put the brush down and faced him squarely. I found the payment ledger. He went completely still. Ah, 5 years. You've been paying back those families. It felt like the right thing to do, he said, turning his hat in his hands. I know it is not enough. It will never be enough. Why did you keep it from me? Because it felt like bragging, he said, meeting her gaze. You do not get praised for doing the bare minimum decent thing. You just do it. She started walking toward him then, taking slow, measured steps. She stopped just short of him. I have been thinking all week, she said, about my father and about your family, and I realized you are not your father. You are not to blame for his greed. You are only responsible for your own choices. She saw his throat tighten. And everything you have done has been to fix his mistakes. That matters. It does not bring my father back, but it is why Samuel is alive. It is why other families have help. She took a deep breath. I am still angry, but I understand that you are trying. So you are staying? He asked. I am staying, but I have conditions. I figured you would. First, no more secrets. If it affects me, I need to know. Agreed. Second, I want my father's name cleared officially. I want a real investigation and a public statement setting the record straight. He nodded. It should have been done years ago. Third, I want to be a partner in fixing this. I want to see the safety reports. I want a say in how those mines are run. That is a lot to take on. I know. But if I am going to be here, I need to know we are not sacrificing people for profit. He looked at her a long moment, and she saw respect dawn in his eyes. Yes, he said, I can give you that. But that makes you a true partner in all this. Is that a problem for you? No. It is exactly what I need. Someone who will fight for what is right, even when it costs. He put out his hand. Partners? She looked at his hand, thinking of Samuel, of the families in that ledger, and of this man trying to atone for sins that were not his. She shook it. Partners. The next 3 months were the hardest of her life. She learned the mining business from the ground up, reading every report and file. William backed her every time she pushed for a change. They hired a new foreman who valued lives over production. They spent a fortune on new equipment and safety audits, costing them a year's profit. William never once complained. The investigation took 6 weeks. It confirmed what she always knew. The company was at fault. The governor issued a statement that cleared the names of the 12 men who died. Mary stood with William before the reporters and officials. When they asked about the Carter Mining Company, she told the plain truth. They are trying. It does not erase the past, but it is a start, and I will be watching them. A reporter asked if she was getting paid for her words. She gave a sharp, cold smile. I am paid to make sure it is true. There is a difference. At the ranch, life settled into a rhythm. They hired good men in the spring, and Mary made sure they were treated fair. The herd grew. They built fences and a clean, weatherproof bunkhouse. William worked harder than anyone, sunup to sundown most days. But some evenings, he and Mary sat on the porch going over the books. They did not talk about the past. It was a scar between them, healed over, but always there. One evening, William set his pencil down. Can I ask you something? You ever think about what your life would have been if none of this had happened? Mary thought a moment. Sometimes, but not how you think. I do not imagine a perfect life. I imagine a normal one. My father working, me growing up, marrying some local boy, and dying in the same place I was born. She looked out into the darkness. It would have been a fine life, probably happy, but small. And now I am building something that matters. I am making sure men like my father do not die for a profit, and I am helping my brother survive. She met his eyes. It cost me everything to get here, but I would not go back. William was silent for a moment. That is probably the kindest thing anyone has ever said about me. I was not talking about you. Were you not? Maybe she was. Maybe William had stopped being just the son of the man who killed her father. He was her partner now. I got a letter from Samuel, she said, changing the topic. He wants to come home for Christmas. The doctor says he can travel if he is careful. William's face lit up. That is wonderful. I thought we could both go, she said. Make sure he is really ready. If that is all right with you. Of course it is all right. We are partners, Mary. But she knew she had to ask. They had built a fragile trust, and she would not risk it by assuming. They left for Colorado 2 weeks later. Mary watched the country roll past, thinking how far she had come from that saloon, waiting for her brother to die. Patients sat on the porches of the sanatorium, wrapped in blankets. Samuel was waiting for them, standing on his own and smiling. He looked solid, with color in his face that had been gone for years. Mary! He ran and hugged her so hard it took her breath. She held him and cried, not caring who saw. You got fat, she said when she could talk. I gained 20 pounds. The doctor says I am a miracle. Or maybe just stubborn like my sister. Samuel turned to William, a little shy. Mr. Carter, thank you for everything. Just William, and you are welcome. You look good, kid. The doctor said Samuel would need another 6 months of care, but he could make a full recovery. I want to come home, Samuel said that evening on the porch. When this is over, I want to work at the ranch. He looked at William. There is always a place for you, William said. But you are young. You could go to school, learn a trade. I want to learn ranching, Samuel said firmly. You gave me my life back. I want to use it for something that matters. Mary felt her throat tighten. We will talk about it when you are home, she said. For now, just focus on getting well. On the train back, Mary sat beside William and watched the land blur past. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For saving him. The doctors did that. You paid for the doctors. That is the same thing. William was quiet for a long moment. Do you still hate me for what my father did? The question took her by surprise. No, she said after thinking on it. I hate what happened. I hate that my father is dead. But you are not the one who killed him. Hating you for trying to make things right would be like cursing the rain after a drought. It does not fix what was broken, but it is better than the dust. He looked at her with an expression she could not name. You have a way with words. I read a lot. You should write it all down. Keep a journal. Who would want to read about a girl from nowhere building a ranch with blood money? Someone who needs to know that good things can come from bad beginnings. That redemption is possible. Besides, it is not just your story. It is mine and Samuel's and all the folks at the ranch. Maybe he was right. The story was messy and complicated, but it was true. They got back to the ranch on a Tuesday. The house looked like a home now, solid and lived in. She stood in the yard looking at it all and felt something like peace settle in her chest. We did good, William said beside her. We did all right, Mary corrected. There is still work to do. Always is. But for the first time, Mary felt like she had time. Time to build and plan a future beyond just surviving another week. Winter came early that year, sweeping down and turning the land white and quiet. Mary stood at the window with her coffee and thought how different things were. A year ago, she had been watching Samuel die. Now her brother was in Colorado, getting stronger every day. She heard William's heavy boots on the stairs. He never slept well when there was bad news from the mines. Coffee? She asked. Please. They stood together watching the snow fall. Patterson sent a telegram, William said at last. Samuel wants to come home for Christmas. What did the doctors say? They are cautious, but they will allow it if he takes it easy. He sipped his coffee. I think we should let him come. The boy deserves to see what we have built. 3 weeks later, they traveled to Colorado to bring Samuel home. The sanatorium was decorated for Christmas, a cheerful place, holding back a lot of sadness. Samuel was at the entrance, looking healthier than she had ever seen him. He was not completely well, but he was gloriously alive. Ready to see home? Mary asked, holding him tight. I have been ready for months. On the train, he just stared out the window. I thought I would die in that place, he said once. Never see Montana again. You are tougher than you think, she told him. He smiled a little. It must run in the family. When the wagon pulled up to the ranch, Samuel went still. The house stood against the winter sky, warm light in its windows. This is ours, he whispered. This is home, Mary corrected him. The ranch hands came out to welcome him. Men who knew about loss in the mines shook his hand with a quiet respect. And Mary watched her brother stand a little straighter, like a man who was finally where he belonged. That evening, just the 3 of them sat for supper in the big dining room. Around that long table meant for 12, the room felt more full of hope than empty. Samuel spoke up over dinner, his voice clear. I aim to work here. When the doctors give the word, I want to learn the ranch and pull my own weight. William shook his head. You're family, son. You don't have to earn a thing. That's exactly why I do, Samuel insisted. I won't be a charity case. He glanced at Mary. She taught me pride costs, but it's worth keeping. Mary's throat felt tight. I also taught you to accept a hand up. I am, he said, his voice firm. I'm accepting the chance to work and build something. I just want a fair wage for a fair day's work. William looked over at Mary, a hint of a smile on his face. He's your kin, all right. That stubborn streak runs deep, she agreed. They gave Samuel a room with plenty of southern sun. He took it slow, getting his strength back each day. By spring, he was out with the hands learning the ropes. The sickness had scarred his lungs for good, but his spirit was strong and the men respected him for it. One night in late March, William appeared at her office door. You got a minute? He asked. Always. What's on your mind? Nothing's wrong, I just wanted to talk something over with you, he said, turning his hat in his hands. I've been thinking a lot about the mines. And what about 'em? She asked. I'm fixing to sell them. All of 'em but Silver Creek. Mary set her pencil down. William, that's most of what you own. I know, but after 5 years, I'm worn out trying to make 'em safe. Mining is just dangerous business. I'm tired of making money off the risk men take with their lives. So, what's the plan for Silver Creek? I want to turn it into a cooperative. Let the men who work the mine own it. They can make the decisions and share in the profits. He leaned forward, his eyes earnest. It's a long shot, but I believe it can work. It's a massive gamble. Everything worth doing is, he said with a slight smile. You taught me that. What do you think? Mary thought of her own father, one of 12 men who died for another man's profit. I think it's the right thing to do, she said. But you'd best be ready for a fight. The other mine owners won't like it. Let them complain. The sale of the other mines will float this ranch for years. I don't need them to like me, which brings me to us, our partnership. William met her gaze. I want to make it official. Equal shares in the ranch, equal say. We're not boss and hand anymore. We're partners. This place wouldn't be here without you. You've proven you're better at this than I am. He paused, looking for the right words. And I trust you more than anyone. I want that to mean something. Mary let that sink in. An equal partnership tied her future completely to this land and to William. It was a risk, but it was also a real stake in something. I have conditions, she said. He chuckled. Of course you do. What are they? First, a fund for the workers. Good wages, sick pay, and retirement. No one working here should ever end up like I was. Agreed. What's next? We build a school with part of the profits. A free school for any family's children. My own father could barely read. The next generation deserves better. A school is expensive. So is ignorance, she replied flatly. And one more thing. A clinic with a real doctor who'll treat folks whether they can pay or not. You want to build a whole town out here. I want to build something that lasts, she said, leaning forward. Something that helps people instead of using them up. That's the deal, William. We make this place about doing right. He was quiet a long moment, just looking at her. You know, he said finally, most people would say that's a naive way to run a business. Then most people are wrong. You can make money and do right by people. It's harder, but it can be done. She held his gaze. The question is, are you willing to try? William stood and held out his hand. Equal partners, fair wages, a school and a clinic. We build something that lasts. Deal? Mary looked at his hand, then stood and shook it firmly. Deal. They had the papers drawn up that very week. Mary Bennett, equal partner in the Carter Ranch. It felt like a dream come true. Samuel was there when she signed, grinning from ear to ear. You did it, he said. We did it, she corrected, pulling him into a hug. You're part of this too. We survived, Samuel. We both made it. That summer, they broke ground on the school. A young teacher came from back east, tired of the city. On the first day, 15 children showed up, kids from all over who'd never dreamed of getting a real education. The clinic opened that fall, a clean white building with a good doctor who treated anyone who walked in. William funded it all without a single complaint. We made a promise, he always said, and we keep our word. The Silver Creek Cooperative got started the next spring. It was messy at first, but the miners learned to work as a team. Safety improved, and for the first time, they owned a piece of their own hard work. Other mine owners called William a fool, but he paid them no mind. Some even made threats, but they never followed through. 2 years after she first walked into that saloon, Mary stood on the porch and looked out at what they had built. The cattle herd was up to 300 head. The school now had 2 rooms and 30 students. The clinic had saved more lives than she could count. And Samuel was in charge of the new horse breeding program. He still had his bad days, but he was alive, and he was home. Even when winter bit deep, he was alive and building something with his own 2 hands. William came up beside her with a cup of coffee. Ever stop and think how far we've climbed? He asked. Every blessed day, she said. Any regrets? Mary gave the question its due. I hate that my father never saw this. I hate those 8 years I lost in Red Hollow, and that it took a death to make things right. But I don't regret where we are now, or the work we did for folks. She looked him in the eye. What about you? I regret not telling you the truth from the start. All that time I wasted being a coward. He paused. But I don't regret finding you, or building all this right here with you. A silent understanding passed between them. They were more than boss and hand, but not quite friends or family. They were partners. In this work, in this life. That was more than enough. The ranch thrived, built on fairness and meant to last. The school saw its first students graduate, ready for college or skilled work. The small clinic grew into a medical center for folks 50 miles out. The Silver Creek Co-op worked so well that other miners started demanding a fair shake, too. Change was coming, and working conditions got better. Safety became the rule, not a privilege. Men weren't dying in the dark for another man's pocketbook anymore. Life was never perfect. Some years the market went bust or the crops failed. Some winters the clinic ran low on medicine. Mary and William had their share of arguments over money or the right way to do things. But they never quit. They just kept on building. Samuel married a blacksmith's daughter, Annie, a woman sharper than anyone knew. Their 3 kids ran wild over the ranch, raising a joyful ruckus. Mary never took a husband. Plenty of men came calling, but she'd built a life that was whole on its own. Marrying felt like settling for less. "You'll wind up alone," Samuel told her once. "I'm surrounded by my people," she replied. "That ain't alone. It's just different." William never married either. He was wedded to the work. One evening on the porch, he told Mary, "Some folks are made for families. Others are made for different things." "What are we made for?" she asked. "For building it," he said with a smile. "For making things better than we found them. That's enough for me." And it was enough for her, too. On the 10th anniversary of the day he walked into that saloon, she rode out to her father's grave. She had no wish to see Red Hollow again, but the cemetery was a quiet place. At the weathered headstone, she told her father everything. She told him about Samuel, the ranch, the school, and the clinic. She told him about the fair wages and safe mines. "We didn't forget you," she whispered to the stone. "We made sure your name was cleared. Your death means something now. It'll never be enough to bring you back, but it's a start." She left wildflowers on the grave and rode back to the life she had built from ashes. When she was 65 and William was 70, they dedicated the Edward Bennett Memorial Library. It was paid for by the ranch and the co-op, with a bronze plaque naming the 12 men who died at Silver Creek. Samuel was there with his family. Old Martinez was there too, still sharp as a tack. Miners, families from the clinic, and students from the school all came. After the governor and the doctor spoke, Mary stood up and looked out at all those faces. "My father wasn't a learned man," she said, "but he knew that knowing things was the line between just getting by and truly living." She took a breath. "This library is about the idea that everyone deserves a chance to learn, to know our own history so we don't repeat it." She glanced at the plaque. 12 men died for profit. We can't change that, but we can build a world where it won't happen again. As folks clapped, she thought of that worn-out girl in Red Hollow. She thought about how far she'd come, not because a man saved her, but because she refused to stay a charity case. She had fought to be a partner. That was the real win. That night on the porch, old and tired, they sat together one last time. "You reckon we did enough?" William asked. "We did what we could," Mary said. "The school, the clinic, this library, they'll be here long after we're gone." "That was the whole point, wasn't it?" he said. "To build something that lasts." He looked at her. "I never did thank you right." "For what?" she asked. "For giving me a chance to make things right about my father." "You gave me a chance first," she reminded him. "Back when I was a nobody, watching my brother fade away, you saw something in me." "I saw someone worth knowing," he said simply. "There's a big difference." For the first time, she truly believed him. They watched the sun set over the mountains. The ranch below was alive with purpose. It was a messy, hard-won, beautiful life. This was what they'd built from grief and grit. "We did it," Mary said quietly. "Did what?" "We tamed this place. Not by beating it, but by making it better. By not letting it make us hard." She met his gaze. "We didn't just survive. We won." He gave her a tired, honest smile. "Yeah, I reckon we did." They sat under the stars, two old partners who had spent their lives on something that mattered. The lights from the clinic and the library shone in the dark, like beacons guiding others home. The story didn't stop there. Samuel took over the ranch, and his children carried those same lessons out into the world. Doing right by people became the common way, not the strange one. Her fight rippled through the mines, slowly giving folks their due. That library became a sign of what people could build together. They all remembered the girl from nowhere who refused to back down. She passed at 72, with him following 6 months later. But their true marker wasn't stone. It was the town they healed, proving you can prosper by treating people right. Their spirit remained, a promise kept for all to feel. Their story was no fairy tale. It was a long, hard road from despair to hope. That honest journey was more than enough. It was everything. This channel brings you stories about cowboys, the Wild West, love, family bonds, and the deep compassion that connects people across hardships. If you believe in stories that matter, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to support this journey. The story you are about to read is entirely fictional. While it may draw inspiration from universal human experiences, it does not depict real people or actual events. Any perceived parallels are coincidental and should not be interpreted as deliberate representations.
This story teaches us that life is rarely fair, and often the wounds we carry are not of our own making. Mara lost her father to greed and corruption, and for years she bore the weight of a lie the world chose to believe. Yet instead of allowing bitterness to consume her, she transformed that pain into purpose. That is one of the deepest truths this story offers. We cannot always control what happens to us, but we can choose what we build from it. Pain can either imprison us, or it can become the foundation for something meaningful. Through Calder Rourke, we see another powerful lesson: the possibility of redemption. He was born into privilege, into a legacy stained with suffering, yet he chose not to turn away from it. Instead, he faced it, carried it, and spent his life trying to make it right. His journey reminds us that we are not defined solely by where we come from, but by the choices we make when we understand the truth. Redemption is not a single act. It is a lifetime of decisions, of accountability, of choosing to do better even when no one is watching. And perhaps most importantly, it shows us that true redemption does not demand forgiveness. It simply continues doing what is right, regardless of whether forgiveness ever comes. The relationship between Mara and Calder is not a simple tale of love or trust. It is something far more complex and real. It is built on conflict, truth, resistance, and eventually, mutual respect. Their partnership teaches us that the strongest bonds are not formed from perfection, but from honesty and shared purpose. Trust is not given freely. It is earned, often through hardship and confrontation. And sometimes, the people who challenge us the most are the very ones who help us grow beyond who we thought we were. Another powerful thread woven through this story is the value of dignity. Mara never allowed herself to become a victim, even when circumstances tried to reduce her to one. She refused charity that stripped her of agency, demanded fairness, and insisted on standing as an equal. Her journey reminds us that dignity is not something given by others. It is something we claim for ourselves. And when we do, we change not only our own lives, but the lives of those around us. This story also speaks deeply about the importance of building something that lasts beyond ourselves. The ranch, the school, the clinic, the library, these were not just achievements. They were acts of defiance against a world that once valued profit over people. Mara and Calder chose to create a different kind of legacy, one rooted in compassion, fairness, and opportunity. It reminds us that success is not measured by what we accumulate, but by what we leave behind for others. A life well lived is one that makes space for others to live better. And perhaps the most touching lesson of all lies in the bond between Mara and her brother Samuel. In a world that took so much from them, they held on to each other. Their relationship is a reminder that love, pure, unwavering love, is often the reason we keep going when everything else falls apart. It is love that gives us strength, that anchors us, that reminds us what we are fighting for. In the end, This story is not about the Wild West, nor about hardship alone. It is about transformation. It is about the quiet, relentless belief that things can be better, even when all evidence says otherwise. It is about standing in the ruins of what was lost and choosing to build again, not just for yourself, but for others. So, if there is one thing to carry with you after this journey, let it be this. No matter how broken the past may be, it does not have to define the future. With courage, honesty, and compassion, even the harshest landscapes, whether of land or of life, can be turned into something meaningful. And that is a victory worth remembering.